Mayor's Planning Committee meeting Thursday, April 4th, 2024. Stand for allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Could we have roll call, please?
Chairman Matthew Koppler.
Here.
Member Todd McClary.
Here.
Member John Eric Hoover.
Here.
Member Denise McKenzie. Present.
We have a motion on the minutes from the March 14th, 2024 meeting.
So moved.
Motion to approve minutes.
Second.
I thought the mayor was jumping all over an opportunity to motion.
I did.
Yeah,
I said so moved.
He did say, yeah.
Oh, okay, I didn't hear him. Sorry.
I did jump right on it. So moved.
Okay.
But you can take it to him, doesn't matter.
I-
If it wasn't heard, it wasn't recognized.
Well, I was wondering, I heard, but it's like, well, he didn't hear, so maybe I'm just imagining that this actually happened. Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. None. We move on. Comments from the general public. We have no one signed up. Is there anyone that would like to speak? Apparently not. That would be a no. Comments from the city manager and committee members. We'll start to my left. Mr. Hoover.
The only comment I have is in regards to the developers that are looking at doing some stuff down in the Waterfront Overlay District. They had a little dog and pony show back in Sand Pebble, which generated quite a bit of buzz, and they were wanting to know if they could probably come in and do a actual meeting with citywide, similar to that, to kind of go over what their vision and stuff is, take questions and comments. So I thought maybe if we consider maybe the next club meeting, if they could do that.
Wouldn't that tie in beautifully to, I know we're doing your proposal and planning, something like what they're doing is one of the options
Right.
we're proposing. Maybe we want to wait a little bit. I don't know what your time frame is, but coordinate it with that. That way it's the full presentation, and I'm just trying to eliminate redundancy.
Yeah, no, well, and my thought was on it. Obviously, that was my original thought, that it would be kind of tied together, but I don't. It's not really tied together per se. It's kind of an offshoot of that. And obviously, that input is important to that process, but with the amount of questions and that the public's going to have, it might be better served to actually have a dedicated session with those folks. And obviously, your time frame is out to like what, June, I think, or
We're going to kick off on Tuesday, right?
Yep.
Our internal kickoff meeting. You may want to do something before we get started, just so there's the fullness of information before people are engaged.
yeah.
That's one way to look at it. I don't know if that's.
Do you mind?
Is it not turned on?
Just push on.
Oh, yeah.
Hit one of the colored lights.
Do one of the color blinking lights.
Microphone's right there.
Microphone light.
Just press one of the little microphones. Like one of these, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
see
turn
the little
green.
blinking microphone.
Like that.
So
There you go.
There.
Okay, I didn't. It looked like it was on because it was like red. Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Do I need to repeat?
No, you're good.
Okay.
You should pick it up.
So yeah, just with the amount of time it's going to pass, and obviously they've already engaged that, and people were asking, was there a public meeting? Where can I go out and watch it? And that was kind of private back behind the association meetings back there. So they'd like to do something similar for the public wide.
Because it's going to take us a bit of time to put together the visual survey. So there's a bit of lead time, and we got to get that up on the website. So you might want to do it in between while we're getting things set up before we actually, or at some point.
And I think they're ready anytime. I mean, I was going to maybe shoot for 2 weeks from now. I know that one of the investors that lives in town is gone next week, but they'll be back next week after that. So
You want to do outreach to let
yeah,
people
you
know.
probably want to, maybe you want to do 4 weeks to get it, because if it's 2 weeks, are you going to get enough people here to make a difference?
yeah, and I don't know if 4 o'clock's the right time either.
2 weeks is usually good.
Okay.
I mean, if you start,
Yeah, if you start like tomorrow.
yeah, exactly.
I mean, did you have thoughts on the next club meeting? If there was,
So
maybe
normally
we
I
can
wait
just-
till the end to do that, but
Or maybe make the next club meeting 3 weeks. That way you got enough time.
Yeah.
Because you should really put it up on Facebook. Get it, generate
Yeah.
the buzz. Get it going.
absolutely. Well, the good thing about it is, and that was the one problem with the meeting they had, is it wasn't streamed. It wasn't available after the fact. If you can't make it, obviously you can always go back out and watch the meeting. So
I think we can do the 18th to the 20th. I mean, either 18th or the 25th, at least for my calendar. And you had mentioned, though, just a few minutes ago that you didn't think that 4 o'clock would be a good time frame. So would you want to do it later in the day is what you're suggesting?
yeah, I would. I mean, again, it would be televised if you would. I mean, so they watch it. They couldn't make it down, but 4 o'clock would not probably work with people's work schedules. So I would suggest we do it later, at least 6, to give people time to get off work and get here. Just be more facilitative.
We could meet earlier because what I've done is split this into conservation and then the coastal stuff. So because I thought it was a lot for us to go through in one meeting. If it's not too much for you guys to take on, we could meet earlier for the coastal related stuff, and then you could roll into the
That'd be fine, too.
presentation.
Matt's bringing pizza.
Hmm?
Matt's bringing pizza.
Hey, where's a good place to get pizza here?
Actually, Lighthouse.
Yeah, very close.
Too thin.
They do have a thicker version.
Do they really?
Sicilian, yeah.
So anyway, what day were we talking about? I'm sorry.
Either the 18th or the 25th. 25th gives us 3 weeks.
I'm actually out of town the 18th.
You're out on the 18th, so the 25th.
Let me look.
I can do the 25th. So the conceptual idea is 4 o'clock here, and then 6 o'clock here. Is that what we're thinking, or do 5 o'clock and 6
It was
o'clock?
just a suggestion, so it's up to you.
Do you think
How much time do you think you need for your coastal stuff?
I would say I think we'll get warmed up with this one, and it probably will take us an hour.
So maybe at 5 o'clock?
It'll be 5, and then I'll roll on to 6.
And then whatever, if we don't finish, we'll just pick it up in another meeting.
Sounds good to me.
And how long is? Not that I'm rushing them. What is their presentation like? An hour?
I mean, it really probably wouldn't be that. Maybe 30 minutes for them to go through whatever they want to go through, whatever, and just have ample time for questions. And that's depending on who's here and who's asking questions. They could go, a couple hours. I know out there it went on for at least an hour or so, I think. But obviously with the citywide, could generate quite a bit of commentary.
So 5 until I get tired. Big motion, no adjourn.
I would imagine it'd be more than 2 hours, so 5 to 8 max, and probably realistically 5 to 7, 7:30.
April 25th, 5 o'clock. Got it.
That's all I have.
No.
I like plain pizza with pepperoni.
Just pepperoni on it, really?
Yeah.
No vegetables?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Other than that, no comments.
And I have no comments. Going on to the agenda, the first item is the comprehensive land use plan update, conservation, coastal management, element objectives, and policies audit.
Okay. My name is Tammy Vrana, Vrana Consulting, helping the city with its comprehensive plan update. And today we're going to break the element in half and just talk about those conservation related objectives and policies. And then with the understanding that also in your coastal management section of your element, it does also address conservation, and we'll be consolidating those at some point. But today I was thinking that we could just go through mostly the policies or anything that you've had a chance to look at to keep in mind these things. If it's a policy that remains relevant, so we keep it. If it's something that just needs a tweak, maybe changes to the date, moving it from a policy to the land development code or some other sort of implementation mechanism, or then just go ahead and deleting it because it's been achieved or it's no longer relevant or changed circumstances, etc. So what I thought I'd do was just to kind of like roll through these. And if you have comments about any one, I'm going to jot down notes. And also, I'll show you what I've been doing. So this is objective C.1.1, natural resources protection. When you see the potential policy topics, those are kind of strategies. So just, and I know it's kind of small, so I probably should make a bigger, or make 2 slides next time. I went ahead and put just the general state requirements to the side. So what the state is looking for are principles, guidelines, or standards that provide for your long-term conservation goals, because your comprehensive plan is at least a 10-year period. And then for many policies, it just keeps going out into the future. The sound conservation principles of all living and non-living coastal zone resources, avoiding irreversible and irretrievable loss of those valued natural resources, and then, of course, having development standards that help you decide what's suitable development within your city relative to the natural resources. So the potential policy topics are just there in case later on we're thinking about, well, how can we solve for something that may not be addressed in a policy going forward? So we'll go ahead and start with the first objective, which is listed there. And then I think there are, 3 policies. The first one deals with designating of coastal lands and wetlands on the future land use maps. The future land use map is what we look at when we're entertaining changes within the community, such as new development or new infrastructure projects, to make sure that they're consistent. Of course, the coastal lands and wetlands land use category, is the full title, deal with those most sensitive of land areas within and water in the city. Did anybody have any comments regarding the first 3 policies, C11, 112, and 113? The second one, you want to take a look? I don't need to keep talking if you want to absorb.
I had it, full disclosure, I marked up the part and I gave her my copy. So she has my notes already. I had nothing on
Yeah, he didn't have anything on
first
that.
page, but when you get to the 1-2s, I had done.
So the feeling was that these policies, for the most part, the essence of them is worth keeping and moving forward with.
I had no problem.
When you mentioned preserve the quality of, obviously given this state we're in, improving that would be important as well. Does preserve encompass improving, or should we call out improve and preserve?
I think that to say preserve and enhance, or to preserve and improve, or to somehow capture that some things may not be in the state that you want them to be in, and you can do things to help them along the way. So I think that if you want to,
I would definitely call out to improve as well, because like I said, preserve could be both ways, right? You're just keeping it the way it is,
right?
not making it any worse. But because we're the state we're in, I think it would behoove us to call out that we want to make significant effort to improve that and then preserve it.
Agree. Good. And I see here we've got some reference to, in 113, reference to unique historical and archaeological resources, which of course would go within that, under that objective. So as I mentioned before, there's probably needs to be some organization, but I think as long as we keep the essence of these things that you want to protect and make sure that we're covered, then that's what approach I have in mind anyway. Okay, the next one is wetland protection. So the objective is, here I want to add this too. So I found some more maps. This is actually on I think Ashley pulled up the Pasco mapper last time relative to the wetlands. So I went ahead and looked around. These are actually the ecological planning units in this area, of course, that the county has identified relative to their environmental lands acquisition program. So they were looking at ways that natural lands were connected, and then of course, because they're less fragmented, they provide more ecological value and therefore may be worthy of protecting through land acquisition programs. So I just wanted to add that little image in there just so you had a sense of what they were looking at relative to the Anclote and Cody watersheds. Okay. Also, just to keep in mind, I listened to a webinar today that was actually put on by some people who are working on the Florida Wildlife Corridor, which I do not believe has any involvement in this area. It's probably a little bit further, maybe to the north. But it also was heavily involved with the Florida agricultural. They call it the Big Tent of the agricultural growers in the state. So they're looking at the Florida Wildlife Corridor as a way to preserve lands and also some of those agricultural lands that also serve wildlife functions. But this double exposure map is to show that in our state of Florida, where we're growing so rapidly, and we have been for a very long time, and we've always dealt with that, at least in my career, with the population growth. But now it's doubling with the climate change, where it's really a more significant impact on our natural resources. So, at the same time we're developing land and losing pervious surfaces and vegetation, and things are getting hotter. There's more potential for water not to be distributed efficiently, and so there's flood. And of course, you have your natural, your forested areas with the management areas that you have around you. So sources of fire from drought conditions and whatnot, and the fact that the temperatures are increasing. Anyway, just something to keep in mind that nature is having an especially hard time in Florida. Okay, so the next one is wetlands. So use the local planning process to protect identified wetlands on map 1.4 on the future land use map from a physical and hydrologic alteration. And I did look into it. Map 1.4 is a land cover map, which looks like that. This is actually, it divides the wetlands into many different types of wetland types. So, but you can essentially see where the wetlands are through the colors on the map. And that's what this policy refers to. The policy goes on to identify conditions that would allow you to designate Category 1, Category 2, or Category 3 wetlands. So on the Pasco mapper, they have throughout the county identified 1, 2, and 3 class wetlands. And so this is just so there's the yellow areas, the blue, and then the red areas would be the smaller. So the larger would be, of course, more ecological value, all the way down to the smaller ones. And that's what the rest of the policies in this section relate to. Actually, not this one, it's the next one. Where's the wetlands? Did I put that in the wrong spot? I think I did. Oh no, it's the next one, C1-2. Okay.
What did you say the difference in the colors were? The different.
So a Category 1 wetland includes wetlands having hydrological connections to natural surface, but they're connected. Any wetland within a lake littoral zone, any isolated wetland that's 40 acres or larger, or wetlands containing strategic habitat conservation areas as identified by Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. So you'll see those large yellow ones, including the one down off to the east of Washington Street. And then of course your coastal wetland areas that we saw earlier in those critical linkages that were identified by Pasco County. Category 2 are less than 40 that don't, of course, qualify as Category 1, and greater than 5 acres. And then Category 3 is less than 5 acres and do not classify as a 1 or a 2.
So the big differentiator is size, I guess, sounds like, right?
Size, connectivity, and those special conditions, like if it's part of a lake,
Mhm.
and then also if it's containing any strategic habitat conservation areas, which I'd have to like look into as to whether or not any of that even exists in the city.
And the main difference between category 1 and 2 from a developer standpoint is they're 1 and 2 are more sensitive. They have the greatest protections associated to them.
Isn't that RV part?
That's a 2. Or, sorry, that's a 1.
It's a 1 for those wetland areas.
Right. So you can build on the highlands next to the wetlands, but they're the most protected. The wetlands within them. So if you wanted to encroach on them, that is where you're doing your mitigations and your other resources to bring back more category 1. So you essentially want to trade category 1 for category 1, either in a 2-for-1 or 1.15, minimum 1.15 to 1 or 2 to 1.
So for category 1 and 2 wetlands, there's a minimum 30-foot buffer between the wetland edge and the upland area. So that's a differentiator. Category 1 and 2 cannot have development except as following: clearing and or construction of walking or biking trails, timber boardwalks, and catwalks for direct access to the water. I'm just paraphrasing here. And clearing or construction for electric utilities, stormwater management, wastewater infrastructure as needed to provide a public service that does not impair the long-term viability of the system. And then they talk about dredge and fill activities in 1 and 2 wetlands.
How come the canal structures are not highlighted any color that they exclude those? Seems like, or is that just?
Maybe the canal structure.
Well, if you look at like Betty and Green there going out, oh, that's just black.
They are not a natural structure, but neither are the other ones. I'm not sure why they're not listed. Well, like Miller's Bayou is a natural structure. I think they're considering those canals off of Miller's Bayou part of the natural structure. Betty and Green are wholly man-made structures. So maybe that's why they don't fall into the criteria. I'm not sure exactly.
Because wouldn't they have the same wetland buffer requirements?
Yeah, but originally it stopped right here,
Mm-hmm.
and then this was all man-made. So I think that's why. I mean, it still falls under category 1 and surrounding it. So I'm not sure. That may just be a map issue. I mean, on either side of those canals is definitely protected, category 1.
Yeah, no doubt.
The canals themselves may, because like my property has an easement. If the canal ever fills in, I get the property back.
Mm.
So every day I throw some.
Keep an eye on him.
But yeah, I'm not sure why that. I think that's probably why, but I'm not sure.
So,
Like drainage ditch technically is
Yeah.
category 1 or 2.
Yeah, I don't have a
answer for that as to why this map, and of course this came from the county's mapping system, so we'd probably have to look into what they're.
Well, because I think there's habitat and stuff there too, right? Manatees come
Well,
through
either
there.
side of it falls under the category 1, 100%.
Yeah.
So it's just, does the canal itself, bank to bank, qualify? I don't know. But if you look even on the map, either side of them.
Well, you can see where it opens up into all that right in there from Brashard Park and all. It's all black. It's not included either.
Yeah, but the yellow, they have category 2 on either side of it, which I'm not sure why, because that's all grass
But
marshland.
with the canals, it's not as though, do they have, what's the adjacent? Is it like
It's
a
mangroves
seawall?
on either side.
Oh,
of
it's
it, so
mangrove,
It's
okay,
mangroves and marshland on either side of them, other than where the houses are.
okay.
So
And when you open up here,
it's all protected.
in those.
All around here, that's water.
That's water, but the blue is all marsh, grass marsh,
Right.
and that's super protected. And then on the north side, that's all grass marsh and mangroves. So the land itself is protected. I just don't know why the canal isn't.
Maybe because it's like a wetland with vegetation and it's not a
Got grass
lake.
marsh and mangroves.
Oh, the canal part is too?
The banks of the canal has.
The banks. So I thought you said that the outline of the banks were included in the blue. No?
Yeah, they're included. Well, they're actually included in yellow.
Oh, in the yellow. Well, what we do is, and the reason that there's not a map that refers to this, is that during the development process, we ask for information on wetland conditions on a site, and then we just measure off from those delineated. So we look to see if it fulfills the criteria for a 1, 2, or a 3, and then we apply the standards. So I guess if somebody came in, we'd look at it and say, well, this is where the wetland is, and this is where the buffer should be, and this is where the development can happen.
And Swift Mud actually usually comes out as well as part of theirs.
There's
They actually physically walk the space and say,
Yes.
well, you know, the survey may see this, but I see grass marsh right here. This is actually wetland. We have to amend the survey.
developers are required to get an environmental resource permit from Swift Mud. So that's another layer of monitoring and compliance. Okay, so for policy 2.1.2.6, I have some comments from Mr. McClary. So under the dredging and filling, under the category 1 and 2 wetlands, there was a comment, we should add the property owner must provide for offsetting
You do it
mitigation.
in other areas. Again, it's that consolidation thing. I did see it later on where
Oh.
we have the offsetting mitigation requirements. So that I put it in and then found it later on.
It
so
just needs to be,
yeah, so I don't know if we need to take that one and excuse the typos as I.
that's okay. Okay, so that one you think is somewhere else, so I'm gonna.
Yeah,
put
it
that.
is. It is definitely noted somewhere else.
I saw the 1.5, I think someplace else. Adequate design must be provided that shows dredging or filling does not impact wetlands of adjacent properties.
Yeah, the one thing that Swift Mud looks through, and we should probably integrate it here, is we say does not impact the wetlands. The wetlands doesn't stop at the individual property owner's property line, it goes on. So part of the idea that we should be looking at is, well, you know, if I put it in my neighbor, am I affecting my neighbor's wetlands? Am I cutting off their water source? Swift Mud kind of looks at that too, but we should probably integrate it because we're looking at it, the city as a whole. We probably want to, you know, any development that does occur, we want to look at the impacts of the city as a whole for these wetlands.
Mhm.
It was my thought, probably not worded properly, but
Yeah, but they're more viable when they continue to have connections to what they've been connected to.
correct.
So, okay, so I'll look at the Swift Mud regulations and see what it says.
How does that affect, when you talk about development, does it affect like building a dock? Or is that,
Well, you have to get a ERP permit from Swift Mud to build a dock, yes.
but if it says city shall not permit development, does that prevent you from building a dock or lift? Or-
No.
Where is that? Which in a category 1 or 2 wetland?
I'm on policy C126. It says city shall not permit development in category 1 or 2 wetland or wetland buffer, except as follows.
So within those buffers, you can do biking or walking trails, boardwalk or catwalks for direct access to the water bodies.
And that's your dock.
Walk or catwalk, that's called
Boardwalk, catwalk. That's what falls under the
But is that,
boat lift.
I don't know if that,
Swift Mud considers, because your dock is a boardwalk, and that's what allows you to, that's
Get
where
out
you
to the
get
water?
your ERP.
Okay.
That's your access. But you can't build a boat house.
Right.
within that.
construction of timber boardwalks, catwalks for direct access to water bodies.
Mhm.
Construction of wildlife management shelters, footbridges, observation decks, and similar structures not requiring a dredging or filling, not requiring a dredging, or there's an extra A in there, dredging or filling for their replacement.
Well, going back to your boathouse, just because I know it's come up about whether allow roofs or not on lifts. Would a roof on a lift be an issue with this?
I don't believe Swift Mud takes, I'm just going by Swift Mud.
Right, yeah.
I don't believe they take exception to that because one, the covers are typically removable. I know the ones like Pasco County, they're removable. So they don't really look at them to that extent. And either way, they're on timber pilings. So it's not you don't have concrete pilings with a boathouse.
Okay.
Is the way they look at it. But if you go down to Lake Clearwater, they have metal building boathouses that are built right on the water too. So I don't know that extent, to be honest.
Yeah, I just don't want to get us a situation where we're trying to do something and we've locked ourselves in and not being able to do it with this. So
Yeah, I would just look at things in terms of, is it hurting or is it, impairing the wildlife or the conservation value of whatever? And if it's not, then does a roof affect that? I don't know. I mean, probably if it's on the top of a boardwalk, you've already covered the water, so there's not going to be any seagrass growing underneath that dock.
Mhm.
Well, maybe it could depends on how much sunlight's needed for the seagrass. But I don't think that the roof, it's already covered, right, with a boardwalk. So,
no, I don't disagree, but like I said, if it's
well, I think that we need to make a clarification if that's, and also,
because somebody leave it up for interpretation, otherwise, well, it's
exactly,
so.
yeah, it's good to be clear. I know, I read through these all the time. I'm like, what does that mean?
You can always put it put at the end in conformance with Swift Mud, code section. We do the code citations or the Swift Mud references in other areas. Maybe just put the corresponding there. That way, if Swift Mud allows it, then it's good. If they don't, then you wouldn't get it anyway. It doesn't matter what you're.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Under item, is that G? Okay, yeah, G.
Oh, yeah. This was under
Or H.
H. You referenced timing for the mitigation. I said it must include a 5-year guarantee for the viability of the mitigation. We do reference it in other areas here. We have 5 years for forested mitigation. I think it's 2 years for marshland. I recommend 5 years across the board. That way you have a
Does-
viable ecosystem.
Does Swift Mud have a time frame?
I think they're 5 years.
Okay, so that's what you're saying, 5
Yeah.
years. Or of mitigation, 1% of property or total.
Yeah. If you
Down below.
Yeah, if you look right below, it says no more than 1% of any Category 1 wetland is impacted in case overriding in cases of the public benefit.
Right. So if you do
My
have
question
to do,
was, are you talking about 1% of the individual property owner's property, or are you talking 1% of the that? It's more of a clarification. We should say
Right.
if you're impacting more than 1% of wetlands on your property, then you have to go through mitigation or whatever. Right now, it's kind of unclear. It just says 1%. And I can come in and say, well, I'm not impacting more than 1% of all that. Leave me alone.
right. Yeah, I think that it would make sense from a on-site versus like a system-wide.
Correct.
Does anybody else have any thoughts on that?
And you probably don't know what you're talking about because you don't have it in front of you. But
So this is down below where it says no more than 1% of any Category 1 wetland is impacted, nor more than 15% of any Category 2 wetland is impacted, such as in the case of overriding public benefit,
Yeah.
Trump, all that. But if you were to say you were doing a dock or a boardwalk, you could only impact 1% of the property, of the wetlands on your property, and then 15% if it's a Category 2 wetland.
before you start having to go to mitigation so
Right.
basically we're really tying it into, if you have a 10,000 square foot lot, you only can impact 100 square feet of that before you have to start mitigating it. And what I'm saying right now is that it's not clear saying to your lot, and I'm saying we should
Right.
put to your lot.
Yeah.
so people don't say, well, I'm not impacting 1% of Port Richey, I'm impacting.
Right, yeah,
1%.
no, that makes sense.
Well, is that in other comprehensive plans, is that how that is intended for the lot development, or is that?
I would think that this is on a site by site, like a case, like a,
Usually it's side by side. They always look at they always take it to your property lines or your impacts site overall.
because overall, your wetland system wide could be changing too, which is different situations going
Yeah,
on.
like Swift Mud looks at it, they look to the property line, but they say you can't be impacting us. They always go to the property lines. They don't look at it overall.
I mean, then you can quantify it. They'll quantify it on their site plans. We'll know how many wetlands are on that, wetland acres are on that site. Okay. Let's move on. 1.2.7 regarding removal, encroachment, or alteration of Class 3 wetlands. So those are determined on a case-by-case basis in conjunction with the regulatory agency. So that would be SwiftMud. So there's really not any above and beyond for the city of Port Richey. And when alteration or encroachment or removal of Category 3 wetlands is permitted, there'll be habitat compensation or mitigation as a condition of development approval. Any questions? Any observations? Do all of those, I mean, in their essence, seem like they're still applicable and useful? With some cleaning up?
You have my comments on it.
Yeah, I know. C.1.2.9, only residential, open space recreation, and coastal lands, wetlands, future land use categories shall be designated adjacent to Category 1 wetlands. So this may be of interest relative to any RV park development on that
Really,
site.
it's basically any development within the city because so much of that is Category 1 at this stage.
Right.
So does this exclude commercial,
Right now it does.
By definition, yes.
which would be our waterfront overlay district?
Well, there's a later phrase that anything that is not already so authorized and designated is grandfathered in, basically. So the commercial stays as commercial right now. It's not like we can take away commercial. There is a phrase somewhere in there that says if it's been commercial.
Where more intense land use designations have already been shown adjacent to Category 1 and 2 wetlands, the future land use map, and have been relied upon for development or zoning decisions, the designation may remain.
What she said.
Okay.
So you're locked into where it is. You can't start converting more residential to commercial because you're locked in by your comprehensive land use. But what is there lives.
Well, because when we bought those two lots that were residential to convert to commercial,
Now, well, they were they were converted to commercial. The whole area was converted to commercial. They were grandfathered in as residential. Once the houses came down, then they flipped to their designation of commercial that existed prior to the comprehensive land use. That's the way that got around it. So you had a non-conforming use within the set commercial.
oh, that zoning was always commercial?
That was always commercial.
Okay.
That was the waterfront overlay district. So that whole area was commercial. You had the non-conforming use of residential.
Okay.
Once those houses came down, you can no longer build houses there because it's all commercial.
Okay, gotcha. But if it was actually residential, that would be a case where you couldn't convert to commercial.
If it was zoned residential, then it could never go to
Right.
commercial,
Okay.
theoretically, by this.
Yeah, according to this. So it says that even for those uses, mitigation shall be the final option. So you need to be able to avoid, minimize before you actually get into the mitigation option for development impacts. Then interesting, there's on-site 1-for-1 transfer of development density or intensity out of and away from the wetlands to uplands shall be required in all land uses other than residential. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, this one I got really confused. I got confused on that statement. I highlighted the one for one, but I'm not understanding what exactly we're referencing to.
Well, I mean, if it doesn't apply to residential, rec, open space, and coastal lands, that means for existing designations that were in place prior to this policy, because it's already saying that you can't have other designations next to wetlands. And we do that unless it's saying like 1-for-1 transfer of entitlements out of and away from wetlands to the uplands shall be required in all land uses other than, which I don't know what the
So
intent.
basically, it's saying you're moving. Let's say it's commercial right now. You're moving commercial out on the one-to-one. It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't.
Why that happens.
So I think that one needs to be reconsidered and certainly rephrased. So I think what it's
Specifically
trying.
calls out density. What's that saying?
So typically what happens with these transfers, and some communities say, well, you've got a property that's 50% wetlands and 50% uplands. You could transfer all the density that you could apply to the wetlands over to the uplands. So you could actually essentially double the density on the uplands because you're not doing it over here. Some places give you a percentage. I believe in Pasco County it might be 25%. The 25% of the density that would be applied to the wetlands acreage, because you can't build in the wetlands, but you can at least get some value out of it. So they'll say, well, you don't get 1-to-1 unless that's what you want to do. Pasco, I think, is 25%.
I think we should match Pasco to that person. Because then what's going to happen is you're going to super over-densify the areas right next to the wetlands. And theoretically, you're impacting the wetlands. So if you're allowed, let's say, 10 houses on the uplands next to the wetlands on a 50 to 50, you're now allowing 20 houses of density. You're over-densifying your uplands. And by the same extent, you're going to super pollute your wetlands that you're trying to protect because now you have twice as many people in that area right next to the wetlands. So Pasco County says, okay, well, you can get a quarter, do a little better.
It's giving some economic value to a wetland. We want to value our wetlands in their current form because they provide an important ecosystem service. Anything that you can have nature do the work, much, much cheaper over the long haul than cleaning up polluted water bodies, dealing with flood situations. There's a lot of things that you can get value out of a wetland. But in the real estate market, not a lot of value because you can't build on it. So you give them a little bit of something that, it's an incentive or a nice thing to do, I think, to provide some value. 1-to-1 feels a little like over much, but that's a value
And the other
proposition.
The other thing what you try to do is, as a developer, if you're giving benefit to densifying to a degree the area next to the wetlands, you also prevent the developer from just buying the mitigation credits and blasting through and paving over the wetlands because they're more valuable to me. I'll pay the mitigation fee and just blast over. No, you know what? The economic value now is for me to densify a little bit the uplands. It's cheaper, and then I don't have to pay the mitigation credits, and I'll still buy this property with all of these wetlands and convert it to green space at the end of the day, and just leave it green, and then I get a little bit of benefit here that I can get a little, but I'm not super polluting these wetlands because I'm now at 1-to-1.
If you think back, probably before I started helping the city, which was like in 2012, the Cody River, the Keys at Cody River, is that what it's called now? Keys at Cody River. They were approved for like 300 apartments or townhouses. It was a lot of entitlements out there. and they have a lot of wetlands. So I'm sure that part of the density that was allowed, that allowed them to get to that development level, that yield, had to do with the 1-to-1 that they were getting off of the wetlands. But of course, they came in with much less. I think they're probably more like 100 or 79, but there was like 300 units legacy approved in the city out there.
Same thing at the Abigail Court. It's got the same deal.
But they have super high density for the same kind of reason.
Yeah.
They didn't use it.
They didn't probably use everything that they had, but they could have. I mean, granted, you still have to be compatible. There's other things that the city can do to kind of help ratchet down to make a more compatible development. But on its face, you could extract 1 unit off of every, however many the density is off of the wetlands and put it onto the uplands. So do we feel good that we should maybe look into other alternatives to this language?
Well, so when it talks about density and stuff here, is this limiting?
Well, it's going to be limiting in that. It's going to be limiting in that you can't use a wetland to get a much more density than was originally intended for that area.
But it prevents you from changing density.
No. It doesn't change you from. It doesn't prevent you from changing the
So yeah,
land use or density, but what it does is it doesn't give you full credit for the wetlands.
I see.
I mean, if we changed it right now, you get full credit for the wetlands.
so let's say you had a 10-acre parcel, half of it was wetlands, half of it was uplands. And on the uplands, you're allowed 10 units per acre. Right now, you could go to 20 units per acre on the uplands. If we make the change to match Pasco, you could get 12.5 units per acre. And so you're getting some credit for the wetlands, but you're not getting a 1-to-1 credit. And then, again, the idea is so you don't have 20 units of density right next to the wetland and all the impact.
So this just speaks to whatever the density is, which is
Yeah.
changed at any point.
If you had a
is what
density
you
of
get
10
for the
units
wetland.
per acre,
Gotcha.
and you had that 10-acre site, you could take the 10 units per acre off the 50% of the wetlands and put it onto the other half, and then essentially you would have 20 units per acre on the half.
Right.
that's
No, yes, it's that whole gross acre.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
so basically, you're actually more keeping it to the original intent of the zoning of that 10 units per acre. You're just giving them a little bit of credit for the wetlands, saying, that's, all right, you did a good thing, you're going to make that a green space, and your reward is we're going to get you a little bit. Right now, you're getting a huge reward, which is crazy.
Right.
We're making you a little better, and you're not going to have neighbors right next door. Wait a minute, why am I at 10 units per acre? I have my nice little quarter-acre lot, I'm happy. And right next to me, I'm at 1/8 of an acre per lot, and I have this super dense apartment complex, more or less, and you have a lot of pissed off people around it.
Right.
It's kind of stabilizing the whole area.
It's kind of a good example of, we talk about gross density and net density. So the gross density would be 10 units per acre, but on that half that you could develop, it would be a net density of 20 units per acre.
I got you.
I know it's a little.
Understood.
It's
Okay.
all math at the end of the day.
Right.
So the next one is policy that I have a comment for, and you guys can stop me at any time if you have additional comments. C.1.2.10 regarding that wetland encroachments be mitigated according to the Florida Administrative Code and the Clean Water Act, and mitigation compliance to be monitored by the state, FDEP, Southwest Florida Water Management District, and the Army Corps of Engineers. So the comment was a ratio of 2-for-1.
We actually have a conflict here, and we got to, because later on, we start talking about the 2-to-1.
Okay.
So we got to square the circle,
Yep.
because later on we'll get to the 2.1 where we set the ratios for mitigation. So
Okay. We'll come.
yes, we have to maintain all these, but you also have to do with either, square the circle.
Do you happen to know what's in the Florida Administrative Code or the Clean Water Act? Okay, so I can check on that. Okay, so we're gonna go on. We're gonna go back.
Thanks for being here, Todd.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so the next one that I had a comment for was C.1.2.12. And this was a really complicated one. It's for the lots of record that are recorded prior to the date of the comp plan, which would be back in probably like 1990. If you do not contain sufficient uplands, so think about some of those category 1 areas out on the coast that are largely wetlands. So there may not be enough for them to actually allow a permitted development. There are some provisions there that you're allowed to have, and you also have limited access. That's another thing. A minimum amount beneath one residential structure, provided the direction and rate of the historical flow are not altered. And your question was of the subject properties or the
And
adjacent?
adjacent properties. So again,
Okay.
that was let's look at the wetland as a whole. And so,
Yep.
so they can't just say, oh yeah, I'm
Block.
not obstructing mine. Well, yeah, but are you obstructing my neighbors?
And this is a provision to add to give property owners an economic use of their property. They have to abide by the strict rules of your land development code and your comprehensive plan. They wouldn't be able to do anything, but at least you can get a structure, residential structure. Okay.
Now, here's where you actually have a conflict with this and your codes to a degree. Right now, you cannot have off-street parking. So if someone has a parcel, you can put the structure on pilings, but you can't fill in for a roadway because this doesn't allow for roadways or driveways. So I can't fill in and put in a driveway, but my code doesn't allow for off-street, or only allows for off-street parking. So I can't park it on the street either, so I can never get to my house theoretically, that I'm now putting on pilings in there. So you have to figure out, unless it can be on uplands. If I can get my driveway on the uplands, that's fine. But what you want to be careful of is someone has a complete wetland space.
Well, so then going out toward Brasher Park, that development that recently went up there, that big house, you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, the Hurricane House right on the right before you get into
Yeah.
that one there. Okay, yes.
That's all Category 1 wetland, right?
That's all Category 1 wetland, but he was on the uplands. So he's got uplands on his individual parcel that allowed him to build his house. And that driveway, if you look at the driveway, it's on uplands. It isn't in the swamp. He can pull into his space and still be on hard land. That's what allowed him to get in there. Although he's got like a 16-acre parcel, and I think he's got 1 acre of developable land.
Yeah.
The other 16 acres he can never really touch at the end of the day.
But that's what you're saying, though. In that case,
In that case, well, let's pretend his entire parcel was wetlands, and it was all swamp. This says, okay, you can build a house on your swamp on pilings,
you can't get to it.
And you
but you can't get to it.
You can do fill and clearing in conjunction with a minimal access way.
Okay. So then you're essentially taking those parcels that are complete wetlands and allowing houses to go on them.
And structures must be elevated on pilings. And then after the plan adoption, you can't create parcels that would fall under this category. So this is a lots of record situation. But I see what you're saying. And if your house is on a piling and you have a limited access road, I guess you have to park it under your limited access road.
But here's the deal. Okay, I put my house and my access road now goes right through here, and I go fill in all those wetlands, and away we go.
Well, it says with a minimal access way. So I think that it would need to be demonstrated.
Fine, minimal. Minimal is I got to wrap around because that's the easiest way to fill.
Well, I guess
The best thing is to say,
there's probably something above in this that says that you need to find the path of least resistance. So
nothing says it.
up above for mitigation. I think for destruction of category 1 and 2 wetlands, it says something about the,
Decision, shall be noted how mitigation to become an option when other.
there was something up above that said that the solution needs to be the least impactful.
Well, again, we can leave it. I just say let's look at it as a whole, the
System.
subject property and the adjacent properties, for at least for the.
Okay, so the next one we have a question or a comment about is C213. Any development related encroachments shall be mitigated consistent with the following mitigation requirements, and there's 3 different requirements. The question is regarding B, which says that mitigation requirements contained in above may be increased or decreased by the city council or by its specific design, depending on the type, function, and viability of the wetland system being altered. And the idea was that this one should just be struck because it's not really based in the
Yeah.
standards. It's just up to local decision, I guess.
Let me flip back. First, this is where we start saying the 2 to 1.
Mm.
On A is where we start defining the 2 to 1. So that's where we have to kind of
Okay.
clarify it with what we have best. So basically, when we have mitigation, I want to develop a piece of land as a developer. I encroach on a wetlands. I have no choice. I have to encroach on the wetlands. Right now, it says if I encroach on the wetlands, I have to mitigate 2 acres for every acre I impact. So that's really the incentive for a developer to not go into the wetlands, because it's going to get more expensive, and I either got to put 2 acres somewhere else on my property and lose that, or I got to buy into what they call a bank. And I have to buy 2 acres of banked wetlands to make up for the acres that I'm impacting, or 1 acre that I'm impacting. One, it says on the next step that council can take that out for whatever reason council deems, and you go back to the Swift Mud mandate of 1.15 acres for every 1 acre. I say strike that out, because there's no economic incentive why, if you're, as a comprehensive land use, saying we want to protect our acreage, we want to do 2 to 1, there's no reason why council should be saying no. There's no reason why they should reduce that requirement, other than making it easier on the developer. You do it for one developer, the other lawyers are going to come in and say, you're going to do it for all the developers now.
Well, yeah, at the end of the day, couldn't you? I mean, you just do a plan change, right?
Well, no, a developer can change his plans to impact less.
Well, no, I'm saying the city council would do what we're doing now, right? We'd go through and we said 2 for 1, we change it there.
Right.
This just gives you the ability to actually make exceptions without having to go through the full plan update process.
The plan change, the mitigation is established by their plan. It's what they're doing at the end of the day. It's what they're willing to impact. What we're saying is, okay, if you impact wetlands, you have to buy 2 acres for every acre you impact.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
And that's in the comprehensive plan,
That's in the comprehensive.
which could be changed by council. So let's say we make it 3 to 1. I mean, we said we don't
Well,
want.
yeah, I mean, what I'm saying is you shouldn't be reducing that minimum. Right? Council can always go more than they want, and if you want to say,
Well, they can always do away with it too, right? I mean,
you
theoretically.
can't do away with it. No. Then you get into state law. You can never do away with it.
Yeah,
Wait,
because you
what's-
always have to meet the state standards. You
Which is
can't-
it? Is that 2 to 1? Is that?
You can exceed, but
1.15 to 1
you
is
can't
the
be
state
less.
standard.
Oh, well, that's what it says here. So that's be less than 1.15.
This
But
is
you
it.
can't.
In no event shall mitigation be less than 1.15 acres of created wetlands to each acre altered, or lower than the state standards.
Right. So what I'm saying is there's your bar, right? The bar's higher than that based on the plan, but council has the ability to make exceptions on that, which they do anyway. They go back and change that plan to make it make it 2 to 1
so
lower.
right now your highest standard is 2 to 1.
Correct.
You also have provisions up above for 1 to 1. It was 1-to-1.
No, that was on the transfer.
Oh, the transfer of the density.
That's
Okay,
not
that's right. It's not mitigation.
But I think Swift Mud is 1.15. We would have to check that. That's where that 1.15 number came from. Or other state
If they
standards.
change it, then it automatically goes.
Then I mean, tomorrow if they change it to 2-to-1, ultimately you're going to 2.
Right.
Probably going to start going in that direction. But
Yeah.
well, what I'm saying is, there's no reason for council to lower that bar if the idea of this comprehensive thing is to preserve the natural resources as much as possible.
Well, yeah, there's always an exception to the rule, right?
But why would the only way you could do it, the only reason you would do it is to give a specific developer a specific economic benefit.
And again, I don't know what that case may be, but there may be a case where you would want to. Obviously, this just leaves it open that if there is that special case where you would want to do that for whatever reason, again, maybe not, you would be able to do it without having to change the actual whole plan.
But what I'm saying is, if you do it for one, you're going to do it for everybody.
Isn't it, if you want to have the ability to go below 2, then the best way to go about that is to say, whatever the state requires is what the lowest it can be, right?
Well, then if you do that, then you might as well just set it at the state standard.
Yeah,
because-
that's what I'm saying is if, and I'm just kind of in between what you guys are saying, right?
Yeah.
He's saying, just keep it as it is.
This does say though, depending on and so there's some criteria, or not it's hard criteria, but
Type,
Depending
function,
on the
viability,
type-
wetland system being
type,
altered. blah,
function,
blah.
viability of the wetlands. So you can consider that if it's a pristine class 1.
And so that's what I was wondering, because I mean, I've been in this type of discussion before when I was in Connecticut in their wetland laws, and not all wetlands are the same. I mean, I know we classify here, but I'm saying even what people consider legally to be pristine or not pristine because there's development right on top of it and it's been there for 200 years.
Right.
It's still considered pristine,
Mhm.
but it's not, because it's had all those impacts, but just there hasn't been footer put into that soil yet. And I guess again, is there a way? I think to Todd's point, is there a way to define where you can kind of go? Well, okay, because there's a glue factory 50 feet away from this wetland. Because this is the type of thing that would happen where we'd have an industrial area, and they want to expand their parking, and they'd be going into the buffer area for that wetland, but they'd be going into the buffer area by 5 feet, and so you'd have the state law aspect of it saying, well, you can't do that because this is the type that you can't touch, but yet. It's had a parking lot, 5 feet away from it already, and impacting it. So it really isn't as pristine as if you go to another part of the town where there hasn't been man anything there. That is pristine, and so that's where is there levels of the level, I guess.
Yeah, and that's where I'm coming from right now. The way it's written, council, if you have a super pristine thing, council can essentially come in to a degree and say, well, that goes down to 1.15.
Right.
Wait a minute.
And I guess using the word pristine, I probably shouldn't have said that before, but I'm thinking more of like these classifications. So one, they're connected. There's less fragmentation. They have different ecological values assigned to them. So, would you want to, impact the category 1s versus the category 3? So I know this like very nuanced,
Yeah, we're
right?
in
So-
the weeds right now. I will
So-
say
We're in
that.
the marshes.
So how about if I look around I'll see what Pasco County does and look to see what another coastal city does relative to the wetlands and just see, perhaps there's some more up-to-date policies that are out there that might,
And
might
the
solve.
reason that this is 30 years old, this document,
Right.
environmental research has come a long way in 30 years, and that's where we got to get it updated.
And I believe there was some legislation last year something that happened over in Lake Jovita relative to individual property, like single family homes and wetlands. And so there might be some legislation that we need to look at too that might tell us what we can and cannot do.
Well, and here's another aspect you mentioned about the do it one, do it for all, right? Well, at the end of the day, that would, if whatever that thing was, it needed to be done for whatever reason. Again, just hypothetically, whatever that project is, it would need to be less than a 2-for-1. If you take that out, that forces whatever that council is at that time, in order to make that happen, they actually do have to open it up for all, right? So if
No,
if they
what
take
I'm
it down to
saying is-
1.15, they would have to change the comp plan to do it. They couldn't do a one-off. That you'd hamstring them.
Correct.
So why do you want to hamstring the council to be able to make decisions
What
that
I
they could
think,
really make anyway? They just said,
what I
force it
think
on
is
us all.
key here is the phrase and other kinds of compensation being proposed. You know, maybe there's something that is of benefit to the wetland system that's beyond the mitigation. I don't know.
Well, the reason I'm saying is, there's numerous items of case law that comes in where councils give specific alleviation to developers, and then the next developer comes in and says, "That's great, you did it improperly. Now you're doing it for me." And the judge says, "Yes, the criteria that's set forth that allowed this relief to this one developer was arbitrary. Therefore, you must give it to all."
No, I completely understand. your argument.
And where I'm just trying to get it is you have to be very careful to the criteria which the relief is given.
Mhm.
And it's not you can do whatever you want, because if you do whatever you want, guess what? You're doing whatever you want for everybody. And that's the slippery slope you got to stay away from.
Well, the other thing is, if you lock it down, it's locked down. You can't do it at all. You have no latitude.
Well, what's the intent really of this? Is to
Yeah,
protect our
the
wetlands.
intent is to
Right.
protect the coastal structures.
I
so-
get it, but there may be some instance. Again, it comes along
Well,
where
what if
you need to be able to have flexibility. That's all I'm saying. If you
What-
take away the flexibility, the only way to do it is to go back and open it up further, and then it's
That's
contrary
fine,
to what
but
you
then set the criteria for the flexibility ahead of time.
Yeah, you'd have to lock it down
And that's-
some way with.
And that's what I'm
Yeah.
getting at, is that there has to be a way to, define
Score it.
these wetlands
Yeah.
that no, there's no way that you're going to get beyond the 2-to-1. But okay, this one, we could go down to the 1.15 because, it meets this list of things that says we can do that.
And SwiftMud does have a rating system for it that they utilize when they go in. I don't know. It's like a secret calculation. They just come back to me and say, "Oh, you got to do this." I'm like, "Whatever. I'm not going to argue with you." You may, and then my environmental scientist says, "Well, we can't argue on this," and then I get out of it, and then I say, "Fight it out." And so they do have a rating system that does grade those, and that I don't know what that system is. I don't know how they get there.
I'll
don't
look
get
it up
that
and
level
we'll
of
see what it
detail.
says. And if there's anything that would inform this, then we can. I do think that it needs to be tightened up a little bit in the interest of the actual application of this standard, making sure
And the
that.
hope would be you'd have a council that would be paying attention.
The hope, but again, we have to protect against the whole.
Right.
We have to. The idea is that the living document or the document reads so to protect against that, because it's a lot harder to change this in its entirety
Right.
than to just on an arbitrary vote.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Okay, so I'll bring back more next time. And then C in that same one, at the bottom where it says that the survival rate for wetland areas created or augmented during mitigation is achieved for a period of 2 years. I guess consistent with what we talked
That's
about,
where I said I
5
think
years.
it goes to five for herbaceous wetlands, marsh areas, and right now it's listed as 5 for forested wetlands.
But it's 5 for both.
I say do 5 for both. This way you have a viable thing.
Because our herbaceous wetlands are our seagrasses, right?
Yeah, that's your
Essentially, you want to
seagrasses.
make sure that those are clean and healthy and clean in your water. Okay. Stormwater runoff is next. So the objective is to protect and preserve property soils and water quality in areas of severe flooding, strong wave action, and stormwater collection. Um, and this is like beyond stormwater runoff. Well, it's flooding, I guess, something. So required developments to retain stormwater runoff for 24 hours from a storm event.
Oh, yeah,
That's
this
consistent
is-
with SwiftMud?
I was actually trying to align this with Pinellas County, because they do very good on their stormwater, resource. That was one that popped into my head with it, but ideally, I think I mentioned this last time, Pinellas County redid their entire stormwater, water quality rule book, and it's like a binder this thick. And they put everything through. One of them is, you have to make sure that the stormwater gets clean, so when it comes off the parking lot, it's clean. They set a whole bunch of criteria for the quality of the water before it goes into the runoff. So ideally, I think we want to probably mirror those. I don't know if Pasco's done theirs yet or not. I know,
I'll look into it. I did see Pinellas County's. I went to one of their workshops regarding that. We do have a level of service standard for stormwater facilities in a different element, so I'll look that up to see what it says as well.
so I was just starting to grab those.
Okay.
Oh, no. I got it on the wrong page yet. So, yeah, that's where I was trying to grab it. So that's where that 24-hour event came. 24 hours, that's pretty much industry-wide in the past 10 years. You have to retain your stormwater. You just can't let it blow right out. Right now, we have a lot of areas that it just blows right out. That's where you get your retaining basins. The idea is to capture the water so you're not overwhelming your, the air. The local.
But this is not a SwiftMud related permit requirement.
No, I don't think so, but I don't know.
I can look it up.
It might be. They may have it in there too.
Okay. I'll look it up.
It would be interesting to see what the county has for any areas in the city that could be bringing into a county.
County drainage system.
Yeah,
Yeah, usually they slow those down big time.
yeah. I mean, I think it'd be good to look and see what they're hiring, because again, we would be more similar to them if we should increase that.
Okay, so we'll look at Pasco County, Pinellas County, and SwiftMud.
I just had a development over in Pinellas County where we had to increase all the retaining basins. The original development was built in the 90s, and all the retaining basins were too small. Everything had to be increased. And we were building dikes on top of them and everything else to capture the stormwater so it didn't blow through and blow out the.
Does anybody else have any comments regarding the stormwater runoff section? And I think we will provide this slide presentation to you, so if you're going through the potential policy strategies and you think of anything else we could be doing, I just provided some ideas up there. Okay, the next one is water quality. Protect, enhance, and maintain surface and groundwater resources in Port Richey. And down under, let's see, is it 1.5.2 that you're?
Yeah, this is the lot coverage ratios. I know you have it per
Building coverage.
building coverage
Yeah.
for specific things. It says shall limit it. I don't know if this is enough.
So typically, not typically, but many comprehensive plans will have an impervious surface ratio in their future land use element. And then you have building coverage that's kind of on top of that. But overall, the building is different from the sidewalks and the driveways and the pools. And so we could look to see what other coastal communities are adopting as far as their impervious surface ratios. And you would see that under each future land use category, like you saw in parks, recreation open space has an ISR, an impervious surface ratio. But we could include those where you see density and intensity, you have an ISR for each one as well. And that way, you're being conscious of how much impervious surface that you're creating with new development. Should
Yeah.
set specific goal of 50% or less.
I was just, we should really state it. I just threw out a number, but
Okay.
you know, the 50% really was just like Tampa's got a good one for it.
In their comp plan.
Yeah, I think so. We're in.
The next one I think is related to C.1.503.
C.1.5.3. Yeah, this is this water storage, retention, and infiltration. This is the conversation we just had where you got to clean it and monitor the water quality going out. Again, citing the Pinellas one where the water quality from the storage basin to that maintains a respectable quality. General note.
When it says natural water storage, does that mean non-man-made water storage areas?
Lakes, wetlands.
Mhm.
Okay.
And SWIFMUD allows for that as long as you're treating the water before it in
Which
some
is
manner.
basically what
Okay. Anything else in that section that stands out? And if you have any knowledge of data related to any of these topics, so for instance, C.1.5.5 talks about pollutant discharge from industrial or commercial establishments. If you have any problems with anything like that or any incidents or just things that I should know about, because I'm also writing a data analysis section, which I've got pretty much complete, but just knowing what's happening helps me to write that. So if you do have any issues with pollution or just issues with land uses and how they could be polluting water bodies, that would be good to know.
We did have a gas discharge in Bayou a couple months back, right? Diesel.
I
Was that off of a boat?
think it was one of the shrimpers, but they're not sure.
I mean, your
Don't know
ER,
who else it could have been, but
yeah. I mean, those are kind of
Yeah.
like,
I got gas. What about runoff from 19 into our pipe?
so I would suspect, and I can't speak specifically for that system, but usually with deep facilities, they are pretty on top of the stormwater runoff and treatment. So, and US 19 has been improved over the years. I'm sure it hasn't. I mean, I'm not certain, but do you know anything
Yeah,
different?
we're kind of looking at that right now
I
because
can
there's
look at my backyard and see it comes off of 19.
The quantity or quality or both?
Oh,
yeah,
I
we're,
think we're getting runoff.
yeah. Well, we have that drain that comes off of 19 that goes then to the little reservoir waterway. They're right by Blue Point, right off of Old Post Road. Then that goes through underneath the road into the canal.
Right.
And so we were looking at that because potentially we've heard that DOT, the county, they're all looking at different ways to get rid of stormwater right now, and one of them would be that point right there. And that started a conversation that we had at the one meeting there on the 22nd, that there's potentially the DOT is looking at doing some dredging of that area. So we were kind of interested in, why they're interested so much in dredging, and look at where they're what comes off of from underneath the road. It doesn't look like what you would expect it to look like. It looks like it's just an old storm drain coming out of there, not one of the newer ones that would drop all the the materials out and then allow the water to go through it. It just doesn't look like there's enough room to do what they normally would do.
Okay.
So,
And that's what you're coordinating with DOT right now regarding getting
Well,
information?
we're doing our own investigation
Oh, okay.
first to get,
Okay.
so we know what we're talking about before we get them involved.
Okay. So if there are problem spots that, and granted, this probably would happen in the stormwater, like the public facilities stormwater portion of the comp plan. But certainly if the stormwater is creating a conservation impact, I mean, not that we can hear about it anytime, of course, but that's probably where it would go is in that stormwater. We could identify this is a need and this is what we're going to do to solve it. And it could be coordinating, coordinating for a project or something like that. But if it's a need that we need to address, then it should, a good place is the comp plan. The comp plan is where you can plant the seeds for future activities. Okay,
Cultural resources.
I have a map.
I had nothing.
You have no culture?
I was good with our cultural.
So this is it's just something interesting. I think I showed this to you last time. These are the State Historic Preservation Office files for historic and archaeological resources in the city of Port Richey. You'll see a lot are along US 19 because when they came in and did their last, probably their last PD&E for US 19, they always are required to do a cultural resource assessment. So you'll see those those case numbers. And then of course you've got I don't know if there's that many still houses out there still or no?
8 or 9.
Are there that many? Okay.
And then there's an Indian mound over on the south side of the wall.
The Olsner?
Yeah, they have it listed.
Just one, right? You only have one archaeological site? Okay.
Existing.
Pardon?
Probably still existing yet.
Yeah, you only have one.
Another one. Oh, yeah, they have the one.
I thought there was like a limit. Is there one on limit or?
They had one by me that they don't have listed. I think it could have got picked over.
Oh, was it a mound?
Used to be.
Oh, okay. So this is relative to structures, and so this shows the year the structure was built in the city. Of course, you don't have any pre-1700 that are still around, but this is kind of interesting. And don't look at where these parcels are because the map underneath shifted to the west,
Oh.
so you'll see some units or some structures in the bayou.
Yeah, that was
Stuff in the
wondering,
bayou.
maybe, they were sunk.
Sunk in the
I was looking, I was like, what?
Yeah, that's what I was
I mean,
wondering.
this map shows it
That's
fine.
Atlantis, Port
This
Richey.
is the same tool I was using, but for some reason this data set. But so it shows that those structures that are in red were 50 years old recently. So they do have some limited. I mean, there's at least the threshold for starting to look at what could be a historic structure. And then the ones in yellow are about to be 50 years old. Now you look at a lot of other things to see if they're significant culturally to the city. But anyway, just kind of.
Which direction did they shift from?
They shift to
It
the left.
shifts to the east.
Yeah,
Okay.
the coast needs to move in to the east a little bit to sit underneath those parcels.
So one entire neighborhood
The water.
for Bon Air and Aberdeen and Limerick and all that, that's all historic structures.
Well, it meets the minimum threshold. So you'd have to go in and say, hey, this is something we want to put a historic
Historically different
designation on.
Question.
Okay. Did you want to add anything relative to? I know you have a committee, right? Historic Preservation Committee?
Has been defunct.
Oh, it has?
No,
We
it's
have 2 people.
it's being resurrected.
Oh, it's being resurrected?
Okay.
It was defunct.
It's growing.
It's growing.
It was a committee of one. Now,
And it's called the Historic Preservation Committee?
Yes.
That's historical committee, that preservation.
Historic what?
I'm not sure what the actual name is.
There's not
Yeah.
preservation in it,
Historical preservation.
is it?
Study harder.
Yeah, I have to go back and read the charter again.
Oh, I thought she was reading. She got to look. Hold on a second.
No,
Do you,
I feel like I'm.
She got a feeling.
That still has a
when
chance.
is the next time that they are meeting? When are they meet?
They don't have a.
We don't have a quorum for them. Yeah, that's,
Oh,
we're
they
working
can't.
on that.
They can't meet until they have another member? Okay. Well, when they get together, let me know, and then maybe we can ask them what they'd like to see.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
Yeah.
Give them something for their first agenda.
There you go.
I think it happens.
Okay, the next one is air quality. So let's see what we have here. So air quality in the Tampa Bay airshed. We want to do things to reduce pollution from automobile emissions,
You're right.
to meet with other governmental agencies to determine methods to improve air quality or maintain it, and then to notify the Department of Environmental Protection if there's any complaints or violations. And I don't know that you necessarily have, I mean, I did find some information for the Tampa Bay area relative to air quality, but it's not really of concern. Sometimes there are little pockets, like at intersections, that have a lot of big trucks that might have air quality issues, but you don't have any. Do you have any issues that you've noticed? US 19 or anything? Okay.
Burns and stuff like that, people burning.
So is it
Is that something in an ordinance need to be changed or something?
is it a problem?
What?
I just,
Well, I think the way that the wording of the existing code prohibits all burning, but my understanding was that there was a ruling in the past by the city attorney that recreational
Fire pits.
recreational burning was allowed, although that's a
I was there when we did it.
okay.
So
I'm just going by what I'm told by the fire chief, by the way.
Is this controlled burns or just illegal
No.
burning?
okay, this is specifically to residential burning, fire pits, things like that.
Okay.
The original intent was you're not allowed to burn yard debris or anything of that nature. However, if you have purchased or cut logs for a fire pit, you are allowed to use those recreationally. The idea of the ordinance was to prevent people from just burning their yard debris because you can take it out to the curb and have it picked up. So that was the idea. And you can't put palm fronds and everything into your burn pit and say, yeah, I'm recommending.
Better stop.
That's where it
I
gets
better stop
locked down.
doing that.
And just that so coming out of that, the fire chief can put together a policy for the firefighters. So when they went out to these calls on how to make that. So we are talking with the city attorney and the fire chief to look at our code to make sure that someone can read our code and know if they can have a recreational fire or not. So
the intent was per gym, yes, you can.
Yeah.
As long as it's pre-cut wood and meant to be a fire.
But you're handling that in your code.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one is, which is not up there, wildlife and wildlife habitat, C.1.8, protect and conserve native wildlife and wildlife habitat from activities that would significantly alter their viability.
The only change I had was instead of providing for adequate replacement of desirable tree species, requiring replacement. I guess maybe scratch providing for and put in requiring was my thought. So basically the idea is a tree preservation ordinance that requires
Requiring.
replacement of desirable species of trees. What a lot of cities do is you can either replace the tree somewhere else on your yard of equivalent. So I take down a 4-inch oak, I have to put a 4-inch oak somewhere else, or equivalent of 2-inch oaks, or some kind of calculation that gives back. Or conversely, they also say you have to pay into a tree replenishment fund that goes on, on city property, replant trees on your behalf or something of that nature.
How does that work on if somebody buys a wooded lot, per se, and they want to develop something on there, they got to cut trees down.
Again, it goes to a calculation. So if there's like a 2-foot grand oak, what the intent is, all right, well, that 2-foot grand oak is 200 years old or 150 years old. We want to preserve
Sure.
it. So you can take it down, but you have to pay $1,500 to take it down, or you can redo it. Now, if you only have it's right in the center, you only can put your house there, then they give you
Right.
a leaf for it, but it's trying to prevent you from knocking down grand oaks.
I think it's worthwhile that we probably take a look at the, because from
There's a lot
my
more in there than
memory,
just grand oaks. And
Oh yeah,
from my memory, I think it's only the part around the perimeter of the site that's protected. I think the others are excluded.
no, like if you look at Tampa's, they're
No, here.
Oh, here. Oh yeah, you definitely got to look at that.
That might be just the little sidebar that we have because, in an increasingly hot environment and stormwater benefits from trees, and also just people love trees and they hate to see them just kind of like needlessly taken down. And sometimes you can, granted, I think you should be able to put something on your lot,
Yeah.
but if you can structure it to where, if there's like a giant oak tree, a grand oak, and it's in good shape, I think you need to have arborists look at oaks to see if they're going to be falling down in 5 years. That might not be, but yeah, I think it might be worthwhile just to take a look because it probably was. I don't know when your tree preservation ordinance was adopted, but it's probably a while ago.
Like you go to Tampa, I mean, you get a grand oak there, they
Oh.
protect it with their lives. You're not doing a thing to it. They're almost you're building the building around my oak.
Yeah, it's tough, but Tampa also is one of the most tree covered cities, probably in the state,
And that's why.
maybe in the country. Okay, on the next page, I saw one more. C.1.8.6, the city shall require that all parcels exceeding 10 acres, and the replacement would be 3, so exceeding 10 acres in size, which are proposed for development, be surveyed by a qualified biologist for the presence of any species listed as endangered, threatened, or species of special concern. So it's just a threshold. Is it 3 or is it 10?
Yeah, I suggested lowering the threshold from 10 to 3 acres because we don't have a lot of large parcels around here. We do have a lot of threatened species and everything. We're a city of smaller parcels at the end of the day.
Right.
10 acres, you could probably count on one hand how many parcels you have there. If the idea is to protect some of this stuff, then you want to put some teeth to it.
And people love wildlife. They love seeing part of the quality of life is seeing wildlife. So
And the idea is you're just getting a survey done, so it's not that expensive. It's not that onerous. Basically, someone walks around for 3 acres and sees if he finds any frogs he likes.
And if he does, then what happens?
Well, then it becomes a protected area, or you look at it for mitigation and that sort of thing. It has to kind of fall to your codes and your ordinances. But if you find a protected species, then they start designating, for instance, the gopher tortoise. You don't have many of them around here, but then they start highlighting areas, and you have to relocate the gopher tortoise to another area or another habitat so the species is protected.
or your eagle's nest.
Eagle's
was
nest.
up. You don't construct during the nesting season, so it might be just, of course, there's probably a buffer that you can't disturb the tree, but what you can't do is, like from a development perspective, is just to make a lot of noise and vibration during nesting season.
And if you find those, it says that what this says is that they'll be required to demonstrate how development will be compatible with and provide protection for the listed species. So it's not necessarily prohibiting development, but they just have to take it into consideration.
Right. How does nature and development live together?
And there's regulations within the DEP that kind of sets how you deal with the gopher tortoises or Florida panthers. Well, Florida panthers, that's a different animal. Pardon the pun. But, there's requirements and ways to address it. It's set forth in the DEP. Maybe we want to reference it. I don't know. But
3 seems kind of small, though. Is that?
you want me to look around, see what
Yeah,
other?
you can look around and see what it is.
Well, for example, like the Gill Dog property, that's I think 5 acres, right? The old trade park lot, isn't that 5 acres?
And it'll cost them all $500 to walk
Well,
around.
no, I get that, but if you, I mean, 3, is it? How much are
10's
those?
huge for this city, so I was just trying to.
Yeah. No, I think you're right there. The 3 seems kind of small, but I don't know. I'm just asking.
Yeah, I mean,
How much does it cost to have this done?
generally not that expensive. 500.
I'll check around. I'll see what this.
Yes.
I see there's
places
better-
are doing.
I mean, I think 10 is large for us. I agree with
Yeah,
that.
I think 10 is way too large. 3 maybe is that too small. I don't know. Basically, 3 can be done very quickly, so it's not going to cost that
Right,
much.
yeah,
Is
right.
what it was. So
And,
it's
you
like-
know, and
Well, I'm just saying you're more or less probably not going to find anything on a smaller parcel, more or less.
The only reason I put it so small is you get into some of our parcels where there is wetlands and that sort of thing. You can get kind of dense.
Yeah.
well,
So you
and
might
also,
find something.
if you
Yeah.
think about, you know, you're largely a kind of a built out or redeveloping city. So what you have that's left is pretty marginal. So
Yeah.
it's probably going to be where the species are located.
Yeah.
So it
I-
might be worth finding out.
True.
I mean, if you're like redeveloping the Walmart, you know, maybe it's just the edges in the back but otherwise it's all
Mhm.
building and pavement. Okay.
Again, this is greenfield development, so like the Walmart, you wouldn't even have to because that's a brownfield.
Does it say Greenfield in here?
Or maybe we want,
Yeah, it just says all parcels.
yeah, all parcels. Well, look at the
Maybe
other
those
ones. 'Cause
with any
generally, it's a
green.
greenfield.
If you've got some green on your site that's could be natural habitat,
Yeah.
unless you've got something that's taken up residence on top of a building. Could be those oxen things live on poles, right? Telephone poles or
Yeah, I mean, for a greenfield, I would say 3 acres. For a brownfield, you probably don't need 3 acres. You know, it'd probably be margin to Eric's point.
okay, I'm gonna look around, see what I can see. Okay, the next one is water conservation. So promote water conservation within the city to reduce per capita usage of potable water. So this is essentially, there's only 2, and granted, you're going to have water conservation policies within your infrastructure element or public facilities, whatever it's called. But this one says essentially the city shall prepare and implement water conservation plans to be able to bring that per capita usage down. So I went ahead and brought in this 10-year water supply facilities work plan because this really gets at what your per capita water demand is. The table of contents to the right is from Newport Ritchie's. I did theirs back probably 5 or 6 years ago. But it essentially looks at what is your demand based on your existing population and also your projected population in 10 years. It looks at your potable water supplies, including groundwater, surface water. Some places have surface water or any alternative water sources that you might develop over time in response to water need. And then it looks at the quality of your supply infrastructure, including your treatment capacity and quality of your facilities, and also your conveyance system. So, you know, can you meet all those requirements? And if you have deficiencies, what are you going to do within the period to resolve those deficiencies and also any impacts on the natural environment? So this is just something to keep in mind. We're going to do this as part of this update process. And then I did this for something I was doing for the city this past fall. So these are your population trends based on the 2023, well, there's the 2021 5-year estimates of the Census Bureau, and then also the Bureau of Economic and Business Research April 1 estimate. So I think what's telling here is that annually, between 2010 and 2020, you've been growing at about 1.4%. And then between 2020 and 2023, and those are multiple years, it was 3.2%. So essentially about 1% or so, I guess, per year. So we would look at what those trends are and come up with a population projection, also taking into consideration that, you know, if you're going to be going vertical, you know, which you have been the last few years, having more vertical development, what that means in terms of population growth. Because a lot of times you think of a community that's building out, how much more can they grow? But then they start to grow up, right? And so it's a bit of a crystal ball guessing game, but we need to have that to plug it into the water supply plan to see if we can match water demand with the water supply. And the water supply is initially set by the Southwest Florida Water Management District through your consumptive, I think they call it a water use permit. Used to be consumptive use. Water use permit. And then another limiting factor would be your treatment facilities and your conveyance facilities.
We have supplied water, or we do supply water outside of the city, so these numbers are probably not the number that we need to be working with.
Yes, we would look at any additional customers.
I don't know how big that is.
Yeah,
I'm sure does.
that's an important distinction. I don't know.
We're under 10,000, which is very important. That's where all the grant money is, under
Is
10,000.
that where we redline the wells?
No. I mean, where we're at right now, we're not redlining, but I'm just saying that I know the number of the population we serve is under 10,000.
Do you have a sense of what your per capita demand is right now?
Me sitting here right
Oh,
now,
let's, you don't have to know. I'm just,
I think we can get that.
so if you think there are some programs for water conservation that you could apply with new development, or you can have incentives or encouragement for your citizens to also conserve water. But when you think about, how much everybody's using, if you conserve it, it stretches that supply. So then you can spread it out to more people. So it's there's an incentive there for conservation. They say that's your first supply is conservation. It's your cheapest supply.
Recycling showers.
Recycling too.
Long showers.
Gray water for grass.
No great water
Next is
around here.
hazardous waste. So require proper management, handling, treatment, and disposal of all hazardous waste produced or used in the city to protect natural resources and the health, safety, and welfare of citizens. So you do have a fair amount of these little industrial developments or businesses, which really is a good thing. It's probably, as long as they're managed and they're being productive for the city. But it's nice to have those little small employers throughout your city. I don't know if you've had any issues with hazardous waste other than the spill in the river. Was it the river?
We have a DDMA site that dredges that got over there.
The dredge spoil. That's kind of yeah.
Only 9,000 more years and we're fine.
We need to fix it and sell it.
Oh, you have
Dredge
Like
spoil site.
soils, like contaminated soils.
Glowing.
It doesn't glow.
Do you have a disposal site somewhere that you?
Yeah, right where it is right now.
Right adjacent to the water.
Oh, is it out in the?
Oh,
It's right across the street.
it's across. It's right across from Alex's
Oh,
place.
okay,
Yeah, there's a big white fence. Can't miss it.
okay.
Glows at night. It's beautiful.
You do miss it because it's a white fence, look, it's out of sight.
If you were flying into Tampa, you could look down and see it.
It's glowing.
Does the city do any outreach relative to hazardous materials handling in households, or do you do any kind of
Recycling.
like a day? I think up there it says household hazardous waste disposal programs, or
Well, once a year,
The county
you guys
does.
do. Well,
The county
once a
does.
year, you guys set out too to recycle TVs and electronics and things, don't you?
that's the county maybe.
Yeah. Well, once a year you have your cleanup, your city cleanup, and I thought you also do. I thought they did it. Didn't
They exclude those things.
Oh,
It's
that's
just the
what it
large
was.
items. Yeah, they excluded like paint and things like that.
when they did
County does do
Yeah, the
hazardous
county,
waste.
well, the county has their hazardous waste drop off over at what's the name of the road?
Little road.
Shady,
No, not on Little Road.
Shady
the
Hills
other one.
Road?
Huh?
Shady Hills Road
No.
is
Is it
closer.
the county landfill up there?
It's up,
It's right by where the incinerator is.
Yeah.
yeah, that's Shady,
Is that Shady Hills?
that's well, the area of Shady Hills. I don't know if the Hayes
No,
Road,
the road
Hayes
starts
Road,
with an H.
Hayes Road.
Hayes Road, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they have a huge hazardous waste recycling.
Okay, maybe we can beef that one up a little bit. Oh, these are just the wellhead protection areas. This is the wells you can see up in the, those are the only wells, right? On the right?
Pardon?
Where the blue is that where your wells are located?
Oh, south of that.
Well, we have
Right.
some here and some down.
Drive. No, that's not where they are.
This is from the
It should
county.
be right
So
there,
we
that
have,
big green area is on the bottom.
They're right, I believe they're right here.
okay, we'll get better
Yeah,
data
yeah,
on
they're
that.
right along that.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Here, there's an interest from this.
Yeah, right there, right there.
Road.
Yep, right there. Plus, we have some here by the city building. Yeah, yeah.
Maybe those are just the counties over there. I just was pulling maps today, so I just,
Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
that's probably county.
okay, let's not look at it. Ready? Let's go. It's not good. Oops. Is that the end? Okay, so
Was that? Well, let me ask you on that. Is that the Wellhead Protection Act? It says there. So
I'm good.
Florida has something that.
I'm going to look at, because I have it in my notes to look up what that is.
Okay.
Typically, you'll have a well field protection ordinance that looks at like how far you distance development from it and what kind of developments and what sort of activities can be.
Can't put gas stations right next to it.
Oh, it's in the good old days.
So,
Dry cleaners.
Yes.
but I'll look to see.
Yeah, ever since they stopped doing film.
Okay, so unless there's any other additions, certainly be thinking about what we talked about today, and you'll get a copy of these slides. And if there's any strategies that you think would be a nice addition to your comp plan, we can certainly work those in. And then I will do the research that I indicated in my notes. And then next time when we get together, we'll go through the more coastal management, resilience, post-disaster recovery, emergency evacuation, and those types of policies regarding life in coastal zone, life in the coastal zone. So it's tough work, I know, going through all this, but you haven't done it in a while, so
The one thing I
you're the
was,
chosen few.
hey, Gus Bilirakis and Donald Trump just texted me. Wow, popular.
Popular guy.
Do we want to do 4 o'clock till God knows whenever?
That's what I was just thinking. It nearly took us 2 hours now.
That's fine with me.
I mean, do you think that the next one will be as lengthy or? Okay, 4 o'clock.
Changing it back to 4 on
Yep.
the 25th.
Awesome.
Okay.
You better add beer.
4 to 10.
Well, you know, and
4 to 10.
4 to 10.
and I don't know, we don't necessarily have to, that presentation thing doesn't necessarily have to be a part of this meeting per se. I don't know.
Well,
Wouldn't
you
that be
could,
better as a workshop or something?
Well, that's kind of the intent. So I just thought it'd be a couple of this, but if we, I mean,
Because really, that development doesn't really
No.
go here.
right.
I mean, it goes here, but it doesn't go here.
Yeah, I mean, just from the.
Well, I didn't want to have an agenda item because I want to just focus on that. So a separate council workshop meeting or whatever, we'll just add. I mean, what's the protocol for having just a presentation, public presentation? Is it a council workshop? I guess you have to do it.
It's an agenda item, or you can get a workshop.
One,
I think from the standpoint of what the mission of this committee is, it makes more sense than council.
Mhm.
Because council at some point is going to be sitting, reviewing some of the things that are coming back based on what the developer wants. I mean, I think it's cleaner if you keep it here because it is part of the public education that we have to do for the community land use plan, right? It helps the public know what's coming down the road or what's going to be discussed relative to changes that are going to happen that are going to come back to this committee.
Well, like the CRA stuff we had when you guys did those things. What's could it be like that? Does it have to be an agenda type thing?
That was an open house.
Yeah, like an open house, exactly.
So I guess
Or
the,
would it be planning and zoning? Because technically, they're gonna have to do that whole presentation again for planning and zoning.
Well, it's highly conceptual. I mean, it's not like a site plan. I mean, it's
They wouldn't have to go to planning and zoning until such time as they were submitting.
right.
yeah. And again, planning and zoning is going to be ultimately making decisions or recommendations to that.
Yeah, so we're the only ones who don't matter.
Well, we
At the end of the
yeah,
day,
right.
we don't, because we don't weigh in on anything that they're presenting regardless.
Right. I mean, I'm just thinking from a lawsuit protection perspective that if someone wanted to say, well, council was in the bag with this because they were out promoting it. How are they out promoting it? They're hosting meetings. Where again, I think you escape that tarnish because again, what this committee is focused on is trying to get education to the public on changes to the land use. We're going to be even though Tammy's handling this, I mean, it's really coming through and back to this committee, that whole, imagine Cody River. And so I think it makes sense that, we're helping the public get informed prior to them going through that process of what potentially could be happening within the city. So I think it makes sense, and whether it's, you want to call it part of this committee's agenda or we have another meeting right after it, I just think it's better that it comes through this committee rather than a committee, or a council that's going to be sitting in judgment of what they present somewhere down the road. This is my thought.
Well, you want to hear devil's advocate?
Sure, of course. You know I do.
This committee is then amending the comprehensive land use plan to allow for said development coming forth, thus stoking the fire of it's already pre-approved.
Could I make a suggestion? Could we make it like an open house, kind of like Mr. Hoover said, and they have a set time where people could come in and have a presentation, maybe have some information on what they're planning. That way, not one specific board is associated.
It's just a public.
So-
It's just a community meeting.
Yeah. I mean, but being a community meeting, being in this bill,
Mm.
it has to be something that is being sponsored by
Well,
the city or a committee, right? I mean, we don't just open it up for anybody to come in here and say, hey, we want to have this.
CAC.
Hmm?
CAC.
Okay.
They have no skin in the game from an
That's a good idea.
authority standpoint.
We normally don't televise or video their meetings.
First time for everything.
They have a secretary who takes minutes.
Right, but we don't put it on video.
is there another?
You can though.
Large
I'm not
venue?
saying you
I
can't.
don't think we're required to do any of them on video, are we?
No, we're not required. I'm just saying, if one of the goals is to get this to where the most people have the possibility of seeing it, the only
Yeah,
way you get there is you have to video it.
Why couldn't you video that one? I mean, I think we ought to video all of them, to be honest with you. But
Disagree.
if you don't CAC, I think CAC's the only one that isn't, right? The only one.
CAC is the only one that does not video.
I don't think that prevents us from doing it for that particular meeting if we did it there.
Right.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
I mean, then
That's right up their alley too.
It's a community interaction. They have no skin in the game. They will never look at this, weigh in on this, other than
Yeah.
theoretically providing advisory services to council based on that.
That's a great idea.
But that's not,
And it could be a special CAC meeting. It doesn't have to align with their normal schedule.
it's up to them, but
We just have to have them call it. I think the chair can call a meeting for them, right?
I don't remember the rules.
I mean, you're coming up on their, you just had their monthly, right?
It's right now,
Right.
tonight.
It's right after us.
It's 6 o'clock.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
tonight?
5 minutes.
Yeah,
Oh my
6
gosh,
o'clock.
where are they?
That's why
They're
people
coming
are
in.
banging on the door?
Oh my goodness.
Sure. Public meeting.
Absolutely not.
Were your ears ringing? Because they were talking. They were talking about the CAC.
That, I mean, then there's no conflict.
Every once in a while, he has a good idea. I got to tell you.
I'm done for the month. I hit my quota.
Okay. Is there any other business to come before? Motion to adjourn?
I think you could just adjourn.
I know I like to do it though, because I don't get to do this a lot.
Motion adjourned.
Second.
Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.